Nominating Committee. On behalf of the Nominating Committee, I move to nominate Doug Grout as the ASMFC Chair for 2017.
Thank you, Roy. Since this is coming from a committee, it does not need a second. Is there any objection to the nomination from the Nominating Committee to have Doug serve a second term as our chair? Seeing none, congratulations. You were reinstated unanimously. Mr. Miller, do you have a report on the Vice Chair?
It would be my pleasure to do that. On behalf of the Nominating Committee, I move to nominate Jim Gilmore as the ASMFC Vice Chair for 2017. Thank
you, Roy. Any objection to having Jim Gilmore serve a second term as Vice Chair? Seeing none, congratulations, Jim. Unanimously re-elected.
All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate your trust in the Grout-Gilmore team. Miller. Next item on the agenda is review and consider the approval of the 2017 ASMC Action Plan, and I'm going to turn this over to senior staff to go through it with us. Tony?
Thank you, Doug. Goal 1 is the goal to rebuild, maintain, and fairly allocate Atlantic coastal fisheries, which falls mainly under the ISFMP department. And I am going to go through the strategies by each of the species and just highlight those strategies that are either stuff that we just started recently or that are new for 2017. And I'll answer any questions at the end. American eel, we will complete the 2017 stock assessment update and consider management response to the assessment findings. For lobster, we will develop and implement an addendum to improve catch and biological reporting in the lobster fishery. We'll monitor the trap reductions from the Southern New England lobster fishery and implementation of the agenda that relates to trap reductions and determine the need and extent of any further management action within the region. We'll review analysis by a technical committee on the Gulf of Maine stock and determine the need and extent of any management actions for that region. Moving on to Atlantic herring, we'll review the performance of the GSI 30 spawning base monitoring pilot program and consider its use for future years. We'll consider management action to meet the goals and objectives of the Area 1A fishery based on tomorrow morning's discussion of management for the within those 3 states for 1A. In Atlantic menhaden, under the first task that's looking at ecological based reference points, there was a request to hold a workshop to discuss and review potential ERPs that might be included in draft Amendment 3. For this task, there was not sufficient funding in the budget to hold this workshop, so if this is something that we would like to occur, we would need to figure out a way to find funding for the workshop. Also for menhaden, we'll finalize and implement Amendment 3 to revisit quota allocation and address ERPs. We'll complete the 2017 stock assessment update and consider management response to the assessment findings. Under striped bass, we'll initiate the benchmark 2018 stock assessment, and this will include fleet and sex-specific analyses as well as regional models. Under Atlantic sturgeon, we will be finalizing the 2017 benchmark stock assessment, and we'll consider a management response to this assessment if necessary, as well as transmit the assessment findings to NOAA Fisheries for their consideration in the 5-year ESA status review for sturgeon. Under coastal sharks, we will monitor and engage in the development of Amendment 5 for dusky shark management, and review and consider the Dusky benchmark assessment management and consider the management response to these findings. And we did just hear about the assessment results from Carol yesterday. We weren't sure if we were going to have all that information available yet or not, so we can alter this ever so slightly. For horseshoe crab, we'll engage the biomedical community towards finding a solution regarding confidential data in order to enhance the stock assessment and scientific advice for management. Under northern shrimp, we will complete the 2017 benchmark stock assessment and consider management response to those findings, as well as establish specifications for the 2017-2018 season and consider industry test tows to collect biological data as we have in the past couple of years if necessary and as resources allow. So far we do not have money in the budget for those test tows, but that comes from a different funding source than ACVACMA, so if we can find that funding, we will do our best to help out in northern shrimp. For shad and river herring, we'll complete the 2017 river herring stock assessment update and initiate the development of the 2018 shad stock assessment update. And we'll review the updated sustainable fishery management plans and habitat plans as required by Amendment 3 and 2. For Atlantic croaker, we will complete the 2017 benchmark assessment and consider a management response if necessary. Under cobia, we will finalize the development of the FMP and work with the South Atlantic Management Council and NOAA to ensure complementary regulations between the state and federal waters. Under red drum, we'll consider management response to the 2016 assessment findings and the technical committee's working group responses to the board's tasks. For spot, we will complete the 2017 benchmark stock assessment and consider a management response to those assessment findings. Under summer flounder, we will continue to work with the Mid-Atlantic Council on the comprehensive summer flounder amendment, as well as develop and implement an addendum to consider management approach, which includes regional options for the 2017 fishery and potentially beyond. For SCUP, we will collaborate with the Council on a next amendment if initiated by the Mid-Atlantic in 2017. And for black sea bass, we will collaborate with the Council to consider the management response to the 2016 benchmark stock assessment findings, modify the 2017 specifications as needed based on the results of that assessment, and set 2018 specifications. We'll also consider developing and implementing an addendum to look at recreational fishing measures for 2018 and beyond. And then we will also convene the climate change working group to develop white papers addressing fishing impacted by climate change, and we'll have a little more about that tomorrow at the policy board. And then we will also consider approval of the risk and uncertainty work group draft policy for management and implementation. And then the last two is establish a policy board working group to consider options to more effectively review progress in achieving the Commission's vision. And this is sort of a question that we pose to the AOC as well as Doug and Jim about whether or not we are most effectively using the survey that we do at the beginning of the year to commissioners, and if that's providing good feedback to you all on how well we're performing, as well as the review of the annual performance of the stocks in August. And what we decided is that we would pull together a working group to best get at answers to those questions so that staff can help the commissioners have the most effective feedback. And then lastly, we'll review advisory panel guiding documents to include chair term limits for advisory panels. Questions?
That's a very busy and ambitious action plan, at least for goal one, considering those are just the new things we're going to be doing. Are there any questions for Tony on this particular section? Yes, Adam.
Thank you very much. So would it be possible under summer flounder, Tony, to look at combining 1.1.85 and 1.1.86 regarding the current stock status update and development of the sex-specific stock assessment, to acknowledge the fact that that model development has been completed, and based on the discussion at the NRCC, we hope to actually see that translate into a benchmark in the near future.
Yep, we can do that, Adam.
Thank you.
Bill Adler, and then Dave Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 4, where we have finalize and implement Amendment 3 to revisit quota allocations, and also, you know, the Atlantic Menhaden, basically. And do you anticipate that we would be able to get an Amendment 3 through its process, which is usually like the PID, then back and forth, all within 2017?
That is what the timeline is set up for currently, Bill. So it would be final action at the annual meeting next year.
Okay, all right. It just seems like to do all of that on Menhaden in 1 year and get it implemented is a little bit, but okay.
Implementation to the states would be 2018, but final action by this commission would be end of the year 2017.
Dave Pierce.
Mr. Chairman, not a question, but I have a suggestion for a task related to 1.2. So at the appropriate time, I would like to make that suggestion.
Sounds like this would be an appropriate time.
Okay. This is an important part, well, it's all important, but this one strikes me as especially important. Section 1.2 reads, strengthen state and federal partnerships to improve comprehensive management of shared fisheries resources. And then task 1.2.3 goes on to say, work with the regional fishery management councils and NOAA fisheries to improve alignment between state and federal fishery management programs. I would like to add another task that's related to that one. That's very specific to something that has just happened, and it's very relevant to ASMFC business and how we interact with our federal counterparts. That would be national standard number 1. So I would suggest that another task B, work with the regional fishery management councils and NOAA fisheries to review changes in national standard number 1 guidelines and their implications for alignment of state and federal fishery management programs. One might assume that national standard number 1 review implications for us would be under task 1.2.3, but not necessarily so. I would like to make that very specific. The guidelines, the final guidelines have just come out. No one, I don't think, has really taken a close look at them to determine if anything has changed, if there are implications for how we align with federal fisheries management programs. So I'd like to be very specific with regard to that. I don't think it would involve much work or expense, but it would be a valuable task for ASMFC, again, working with our federal partners. I can make that in the form of a motion if you would like, Mr. Chairman.
I thought you were.
Well, I didn't say I move.
Oh.
Well, I would move to add another task to section 1.2, and it would read, work with the regional fishery management councils and NOAA fisheries to review changes in national standard number 1 guidelines and their implications for alignment of state and federal fishery management programs. So that is my motion, Mr. Chairman.
We'll get it up there, and once we get it up there, we'll see if we have a second to that motion.
the National Standard Number 1 guidelines.
Does that wording capture your motion, David?
Yes, that does. Yeah. And I make the motion in part because it follows up somewhat nicely with the plenary session we had at the beginning of this meeting, and that we spoke about the progress we have made, where we are right now, and what we need to do in the future. What we didn't highlight at that time was state directors, notably, are a bit of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and that we are federal fisheries managers. We are members of the federal councils, and we are ruled, therefore, by the national standard guidelines. But then we take off that hat, if we can. We come to ASMFC board meetings, and now we are state directors that are not ruled by those guidelines or by that federal fisheries law. So therefore, the changes that have been made in the National Standard Number 1 guidelines have implications for how we do our business and how we interact with other states and also with the federal government. So this will help us better understand if there are any implications. There may be none, but I think there might be.
Is there a second to this motion? Jay McNamee, excuse me. Further discussion on this motion? Okay, let's, do you need a time to caucus? Does anybody need time to caucus on this? Seeing no heads nodding. All those in favor of this motion, raise your hand. All opposed? Abstentions? Null votes? Motion carries unanimously. Representative Zoibrun, excuse me, I mispronounced your name.
That's okay.
Welcome, and you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, especially as someone that's very new to this board, is I understand now that this plan, the bold-faced tasks are new tasks, so thank you for that. But I'm curious on how you prioritize these tasks. Are they prioritized based on the number sequence of how they appear, or is there any priorities within this plan?
They're not prioritized in any specific order. They are just all the tasks that we plan on getting done in 2017.
Any other questions for Tony, Brandon, and then John?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just one in regards under Jonah Crab, and maybe I don't know what the final outcome of tomorrow's meeting will be in regards to Jonah Crab, but it's specific to Addendum 2. There's discussions about also addressing bycatch definitions there. I don't know if that needs to be added. Again, we don't know. That hasn't been specifically decided yet by the Lobster Board, but I'm assuming that it will get approved to be included in this addendum.
We can add bycatch to the task if the board includes it in there. Since it hadn't been officially included, we did not align it in.
John McMurray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to Menhaden for a minute. You mentioned the ERP workshop and the lack of funding. Is that kind of off the table now, or are you looking for funding? And the second part of my question is, was that part of the timeline for Menhaden now, or was that something new that was introduced fairly lately?
It was not something that was in the original timeline that when we first started developing Amendment 3. It was something that had come up, I a couple of months ago, I guess. And then since the issue has come up, there have been some folks who originally had asked us to do the workshop have said, oh, we don't need a workshop anymore. And then other folks that still are interested in a workshop. So I think that there's mixed views on whether a workshop is necessary or not. So if the board is definitely wanting to have a workshop, then we would need that direction, and then we would need to figure out a way to fund it.
Any other questions for Tony? Seeing none, we'll go to Goal 2, Pat Canfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Goal 2 covers the stock assessment activities for 2017, as well as all of the fishery science surveys underlying fisheries research that feed into the stock assessments. Starting with Task 212, the benchmark assessments that are planned for completion for 2017 include croaker, sturgeon, shrimp, and spot. In addition, for assessment updates, we will do river herring, menhaden, eel, bluefish, scup, black sea bass, and summer flounder. So again, a lot of stock assessment activity in 2017. Task 213 covers the peer reviews that the Commission will organize, again for benchmarks of sturgeon, shrimp, and spot and croaker. Also, a newer activity under Task 214 is related to southern flounder. As you may recall, last year in the action plan there was a request for the Commission to support some early data gathering and assessment feasibility coordination among the South Atlantic states to see if a regional stock assessment could be done for southern flounder, and those states have asked the Commission to support a couple more workshops in 2017. Again, this is another activity that we currently don't have funding for, and we would have to reprioritize activities in order to support southern flounder work, assessment work. 217 is a new activity to work with the Assessment Science Committee to conduct a data best practices workshop, as well as expand our fishery independent survey database to promote more rapid completion of stock assessments and their reports. It would build off a very productive data best practices workshop that CDAR had a year or two ago, again to sort of streamline how data come into assessments and how decisions are made about which surveys and other data sources to use in assessments. Sometimes that can slow down the process. Task 2110 pertains to the risk and uncertainty policy that a work group has been developing, and we'll hear more about this at the policy board tomorrow. So we hope to bring that draft policy forward to the board for consideration and approval in 2017, and tied to that, hold a commissioner workshop on management risk and uncertainty to work through some examples and how the policy may work out. All of the activities under Strategy 2.2 are related to the ASMFC research priorities. The Commission has maintained a long and growing list of research priorities, both by species, across species, and some specific sections on habitat research, as well as social and economic research. We will update that again in 2017. It's been a few years since we've updated it from recommendations from individual assessments. And in order to expand the network that those research priorities are provided to, we have a task 222 to organize a workshop with the Sea Grant research directors from all of the different states to get that information to the Sea Grant programs, hopefully to promote more coordination and funding support through Sea Grant. Again, in the parenthetical, you can see that that's currently not in the budget, but something that we would have to prioritize. Task 2233 is to monitor and participate in the Mid-Atlantic Council's redesign of their research set-aside program. As you all know, that was sort of turned off a couple of years ago due to some issues, and so we will continue to work with the Mid-Atlantic Council and its members to hopefully bring that program back online. Moving down to 226, that pertains to the Northeast Area Monitoring and Assessment Program. The new task there is to develop and implement a strategy to figure out future funding needs in order to address some shortfalls that have been experienced certainly this year and are anticipated for 2017 for both the Mid-Atlantic Southern New England Trawl Survey as well as the Maine New Hampshire Trawl Survey under the NEMAP program. Also, we intend to have a NEMAP summit, which would bring together the NEMAP Operations Committee, the NEMAP Board, as well as the various technical groups under NEMAP to reassess the program structure and committee functions and determine the path forward. NEMAP is now about a decade old, and so we want to evaluate our future direction. Task 227 covers the Southeast Area Monitoring and Assessment Program, CMAP. That's been around for almost 3 decades, I think, and so not a whole lot of new activities, but we do have a new 5-year CMAP management plan that we will begin to implement next year. Moving down to task 2210, this covers all activities under MRIP. We plan to participate in the development of a MRIP strategic plan, as well as track the MRIP new effort survey review and time series calibration. That's been touched on earlier this week, but that will have implications both for upcoming stock assessments as well as tracking quotas and considering changes to management. And we experienced delays in some of the wave data this past year, and so the Commission will continue to highlight our concerns related to those delays and final annual estimates. Task 2211 covers the fish aging research and activities of the Commission. The plans are to hold an aging workshop on American eel next year, and some of that work has already begun with an exchange that our staff has organized. Moving down to economics and social sciences under 2213, we plan to begin developing and providing basic socioeconomic information within the FMP's amendments and addenda, and also the Atlantic Menhaden socioeconomic study is due to wrap up early in 2017, and so the Economics Committee will provide guidance and translation of those results to the Menhaden Board and PDT during development of Amendment 3. Task 234 is a new activity related to citizen science initiatives. There's been a number of new initiatives taking place up and down the coast. The Atlantic Communications Committee that Tina and others coordinate had a nice session on this about a month ago, and so we're going to track some of the activities that the South Atlantic Council has already had underway, as well as explore opportunities for citizen science to feed information into Commission assessment and other processes. And I think that concludes all the new activities under Goal 2.
Any questions for Pat on this goal? Jason?
Yeah, quick question, Pat. I might be off too. So the recalibration of MRIP is going to trigger a set of assessment somethings, updates. I'm not sure what they're calling them. I think it's slated for 2018, but I have to imagine there's going to be a set of tasks that are going to begin in 2017. So I just offer that comment. Maybe you've already thought about it. But it might be something that needs to be considered to work into the 2017 tasks.
Yes, thanks, Jason. There are a number of venues where both Commission staff as well as folks on the technical committees are plugging in. For example, the MRIP transition team which Tony serves on. They've got a timeline laid out. I think many of us have seen it, but includes, as that male-based fishing effort survey moves into its third year in 2017, recalibrating. I think that's the recalibration work is being led by the science centers, but you know, other folks are involved in terms of reviewing that work. I think it will be peer-reviewed by the Center for Independent Experts. And then, as we have discussed with the councils and at the NRCC table, we're setting aside time on those assessment schedules to dedicate towards the MRIP, the new MRIP numbers, and perhaps some candidate recreational species that we should address first. And so I think that's also true for the South Atlantic species under CEDAR.
Brandon, and then John.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a question or a clarification under task 2.1.2 regarding, it has striped bass is going to have a update assessment. Is that, it's not under the action plan for striped bass, and they just did one this past year, and they're getting ready for the peer reviewed. So just wondering if that's if that's on the agenda for next year.
That is an error and a holdover from last year. So there will not be a striped bass update next year.
John Clark, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pat, I have a question about 2.2.131, develop and provide basic socioeconomic information for inclusion in the FMPs. What exactly are you planning to put in there? Are we going to be looking at actual economic impacts of management decisions, or is it just going to be more of a description of who's fishing and what might happen?
Thanks, John. More the latter. It would be data that's relevant, you know, readily at hand, dockside values, number of vessels participating in a fishery. We have done some preliminary work with ACCSP to see what they have on hand in terms of economic and social data, including demographics of a fishing fleet or participants. So it'd really be that just basic level of information. It wouldn't be an analysis, but more a description of current status of the fishery.
Follow-up?
Just briefly, I mean, just using it as an example, we've heard this week again about the impact that the striped bass size limits have had in the Chesapeake. This would seem to be something that could be quantified fairly simply. We have people that want to give us their information on that, and could data like that be incorporated into this task?
I mean, as the task states, you know, it could be folded into addenda to FMP, so that may be dependent on the timing of the next one for striped bass. But it sounds like that's the nature of those data are readily on hand, and so when the timing's right, they could be plugged in for each species.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to check on.
Any other questions for Pat? Lauren?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Considering what you said toward the end of your report, sir, regarding citizen science, in my own personal background, I've had experience with such science efforts in freshwater environments in terms of management and assessment, sometimes by advanced placement high school students, sometimes by interested retired scientists, etc. Would this be the kind of thing that we would anticipate for the marine system also under what you described?
Thank you, Lauren. The current examples are like fish tagging efforts. South Carolina DNR, for example, has been very active in having angler groups in that state tag fish, working closely with the state biologists to do it in a certified, correct manner. We've learned in the last couple weeks that there's a similar program up here in Maine to have anglers take pictures of striped bass, and sometimes those data like lengths can be used to supplement a stock assessment. And there are other examples up and down the coast. So that's the nature of some of the citizen science activities that we're aware of now. But I don't think there's any limitation on what would be considered. We're just trying to, get a better sense of what's going on up and down the coast. And sometimes the data are useful, sometimes they aren't. But I don't think it would be, limit some of the groups that you talked about.
I certainly, just to add that, sir, if I could, I certainly appreciate the opportunities that exist and the fact that such efforts enhance credibility of this organization in the eyes of the general public. Thank you.
We are at a hard stop right now where we do need to go to our luncheon at this point. Roy, I know you have a question? Okay. If anybody has another question for Pat, we can take it up after the dinner. We'll be coming back, or the lunch. We'll be coming back here. We'll finish up the business session and then go into Menhaden. And just so you all know, the luncheon will be at the same facility that we were at last night for the dinner. So we'll see you all down at the Hart Award dinner.
Beautiful.
Lunch.
Session here.
Please close the back door.
Yes. And last one in, please close the back door. Keep all the heat we have in here. Not much. All right, just to check, were there any more questions from for Pat on goal number 2? Seeing none, we'll turn it over to Tony and goal number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Goal 3 is to promote the compliance with the fishery management plans to ensure sustainable use of the Atlantic coastal fisheries, and this is our law enforcement goal. The Law Enforcement Committee will be focusing on evaluating and reporting out on compliance issues associated with newly implemented plans. Some of those will focus on lobster, tautog, Jonah crab, and any other species that have newly implemented programs that come up next year. We'll continue to work with the Tautog Enforcement Committee to review and evaluate the effectiveness of a commercial tagging program and user acceptance if that program were to be adopted. The committee will advance the recommendations of the American Lobster Enforcement Subcommittee to enhance cooperative funding and enforcement activities for commercial fisheries and nearshore and offshore waters, as well as advance any recommendations from the Aerial Enforcement Subcommittee that would support or enhance existing state federal enforcement for commission-managed species. Are there any questions?
Questions for Tony on this goal? Seeing none, we'll move on to goal number 4.
For goal 4, it's to protect and enhance fish habitat and ecosystem health through partnership and education. And this goal focuses on the Commission's Habitat Committee as well as the Atlantic Coast Fish Habitat Partnership. The partnership as well as the Habitat Committee met at the last week down in Portland, and the Habitat Committee had made 2 changes to their strategies to achieve their goal, and so I will note those. If you want to see them, we can change the screen over and I can show you the words for those if needed. But highlighting new activities, we'll be co-sponsoring an artificial reef symposium at AFS in 2017 in Tampa and will support participation by the commission staff being at the committee and artificial reef subcommittee members if we have funding available for them. We will have our new habitat management series, which will be living shorelines and submerged aquatic vegetation. And then under task 4.4.1, the committee has asked to add 2 new words to this task. So it is provide information or comment on Atlantic Coast projects, plans, policies, and permits in accordance with ASMFC project review protocol. So they added the word plans and policies to that. And they also asked to have a new task added under 4.5, and that is to communicate with the Assessment Science Committee and other relevant entities to better link habitat and stock productivity. And this is a continuation on, at the last annual meeting, Jake had presented to the policy board about finding ways to include habitat in stock assessments. And so we continued that conversation at this last habitat committee, which I'll report out on a little bit more at policy board. But this is just to further that recommendation that the policy board had last year. And then lastly, we will, in addition to identifying gaps in coastal regulatory planning, recording climate change impacts, we'll make recommendations to increase resiliency in state activities. Any questions?
Question on this goal for Tony? Okay, we will move on to goal number 5, and this is Tina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Goal 5 is on strengthen stakeholder and public support for the Commission. New activities for 2017 are under Task 519, prepare brief, simplified stock assessment overviews for posting on YouTube and the Fishery Science 101 page, and our focus will be on black sea bass and Atlantic sturgeon. 5.1.10 will be explore use of story mapping and photojournaling to better communicate science and management activities. On the website, you can find links to a couple of examples in case you have questions exactly on what story mapping and journaling is. Task 5.1.11 is solicit outside sources, develop short video clips on fisheries management and science activities. Moving on to 5.2.1, we'll continue to publish our annual report and focus on the 2016 activities. 5.2.2 will be preparing stock assessment overviews with the focal species that will be undergoing benchmark and assessment updates. Those are black sea bass, croaker, red drum, spot, sturgeon, shrimp, menhaden, and river herring. Under Task 5.2.5, we will develop a Fisheries Management 101 page very similar to the Fisheries Science 101 page. Under Task 5.3.2, we will conduct an annual training workshop for science and ISFMP staff on the very issue we talked about earlier, which is story mapping and photojournaling, to expand staff skill set and enhance communication tools. And that's the new activities for outreach. Thank you.
Questions for Tina on this particular goal and the actions under this goal? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to goal number 6, Bob Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Goal 6 is largely unchanged from last year. It's the legislative agenda for the Commission and the activities on Capitol Hill and interacting with our elected officials. Overall, as I said, it's unchanged. We're going to continue the work that Deke and I do on the Hill relating to the offices there and making the Commission's priority known, as well as tracking a number of legislative activities that are going on in Capitol Hill. And we'll continue to try to get the commissioners as engaged as you are willing to be on Capitol Hill. Anytime we are in town and you want us to help you go to meetings, we're more than happy to set those up and bring you to Capitol Hill. There are a couple items in here that are in bold. 6.1.4. Apparently there's an election going on in a couple weeks. I haven't heard much about it, but I guess we'll deal with that. So basically, this just says we're going to react to the new administration and the 115th Congress once they're seated, and reach out to the new folks, especially the folks on appropriation committees and committees that deal with natural resources and ocean and fishery issues. So we'll do that. In item 6.2.3, The bold language includes, well, there's a long list of the priority activities for ASMFC and the funding areas. And fisheries information networks have been added to that list, and this is a reflection of the governance change for ACCSP. Since ACCSP is now a program within the commission, the fin will become a priority funding area for the commission, and we'll continue to work with the Pacific States Commission and the Great Lakes Commission and the Gulf Commission to highlight the priorities that go around the whole country, and fins and CMAP and NEMAP and council and commission lines and a number of other things are always on that joint list. So we'll keep doing that work, and the last bit of Goal 6 is tracking legislation on Capitol Hill. So that's a quick summary of what's included in Goal 6, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Bob on this goal? Any of the actions? Seeing none, we'll turn to Goal 7. Laura Leach.
Thank you, Doug. As you know, Goal 7 is the basically administration of the commission. So most of it is ongoing. We do have some new tasks, and I'm not going to read all of them, but I'm going to hit on the highlights. We will be launching our inventory module in our accounting software just so we continue to get more and more equipment with APIS and that. So I want to make sure we have perfect track of that. We'll be fully incorporating ACCSP into the commission under the new governance structure. We're going to appoint an investment committee for the commission's retirement program. That's a formality, basically, that our retirement broker asked us to do this year. Basically, the committee will be Bob and I, because we do it anyway, but he wants to formalize it. We will be revising the commission's retirement plan documents to ensure qualifications for participation in the plan are clearly and accurately defined. Again, that's an outgrowth of the APIS and the temporary and seasonal employees that we hire. We will be developing a commission compensation plan with updated job classifications and salaries based on location, again, because of APIS. Developing SOPs that detail HR policies for Arlington-based and state-based employees. We will be conducting a comprehensive review and revision of our employee handbook. We'll be documenting our standards for electronic records retention and develop a site map of the Commission's electronic filing system. We will communicate our HR support available to state-based employees, make sure the state-based employees know all of the services that we provide for them. We will continue to update, obviously we do it all the time now, on an ongoing basis, the Commissioner Manual, and making sure that we inform you all when the update is substantial, but no less than twice a year. And we will continue to work with an HR attorney to ensure that all HR practices are consistent with state laws. That's my update.
Any questions on these action item goals for okay, ACCSP, Mike.
I'm all excited I'm making my debut before the entire commission. The FY17 action plan for ACCSP is essentially taken from those of you who are members of the ACCSP Coordinating Council. This is essentially the plan that you just approved a few hours ago as part of the funding request for ACCSP, and it's based on the ACCSP strategic plan. As you may recall from our transition plan, we will be folding the strategic plans together. ACCSP's happens to renew at the same times that the ASMFC's does, and it's at that point we'll merge them together. So this is a little bit different in the sense that it was created in a little bit of a different way. I'm not going to go through every single one since to many of you this will be new. Goal 8.1 is essentially to pull together the best available data that we can, and this works. We'll continue to maintain our data warehouse feeds and work to populate the newer modules in our data warehouse. We will also have just deployed a new query interface, and we're going to be monitoring that to make sure that it provides services that we expect it to, and to continue to make adjustments to it as needed based on feedback that we get from our end users. We'll keep working with our partners in 8.2. We work with our partners to improve the data collection programs, either ones that are managed by ACCSP or potentially to provide technical assistance to folks who are working on their own systems. We'll be working on upgrades to SAFES as I articulated to the council a little while ago. We'll continue to manage the APIS and the other data-related tools. We built a suite of tools to help support APIS as part of the work that we've been doing. We're going to be working on the safest redevelopment process, and many of those of you who are fisheries managers, your staff people will be directly working with us. The lobster system that we built a couple of years ago for the Lobster Technical Committee will continue to be operated. We are gradually enhancing that as we get lessons learned about how to best utilize it. And every year we get together and talk about what did it work, how did it work well, and what does it need, and where didn't things work as well as they could. That system will continue to be managed. And we'll keep working on the tablet, and now soon, I hope, phone-based systems of SAFES. We've had a lot of demand for folks to build phone-based applications. The tricky bit is we're asking for a lot of data, and so we have to find some way to stuff all that into a phone. 8.3, we're going to continue to work to look for additional funds. ACCSP has the opportunity to pursue funding through the FIS and other ways. We'll continue to track the performance of our funded projects, and we'll be making some adjustments to the funding decision process. For those of you who aren't familiar, ACCSP has an independent process that determines the allocation of the funds that were given to it through both ACFACMA and through the FIN line and the NIMS budget. And we'll continue to make revisions on our processes as needed based on input that we get from our constituents. We'll continue to maintain executive leadership and collaborative involvement with our partners through our various committees, which means that we'll continue to have our coordinating council meet at the regular commission meeting weeks. This will help keep folks informed and keep folks plugged into the processes that we're working on. Our technical and policy level committees, and there are several, will continue to meet regularly, and in fact will probably be a little bit busier next year because we're looking at some adjustments to our standards as well as the new systems development. 8.5, monitor and improve the usefulness of our products. We do have metrics that we manage. We look at how well our systems perform, how many times they're being used, where we're cited in publications, those kinds of things, so that we can tell whether our data are being used. And of course, we request feedback from our end users all the time. Our systems actually have methods to provide comments or questions directly to us. We'll continue to work hard to maintain clear lines of communications between staff and our constituents, and we'll also make sure that we have clear feedback loops in place so that we're aware of issues as they happen or problems and conundrums that folks run into, especially as the role of ACCSP continues to expand. 8.6, we'll work with our program partners to provide materials to help, materials and outreach to help them in looking out for funding in our processes that we already have for outreach. So many of you have been receiving our annual reports, our fisheries files, and our various different publications. Those are going to continue. We are going to be looking towards merging some of those in with existing commission documents. Most likely, the annual report will be folded into the commission's report and that kind of thing. But those certainly will continue to be published. We'll also participate in fisheries-related events where they're appropriate, and send our staff or others to them to help represent the program. And we'll also work. We a lot of times have found that sometimes the best plan is to just show up. So we keep track of who's doing what and where we might be able to at least listen in on processes. So sometimes we may just go to a conference or sit by the side and listen or participate. So we continue to keep track of all that stuff. We also, in 8.7, we directly participate in the nationwide systems that are part of Magnuson-Stevens. We will, and those are right now are FIS and MRIP primarily. I sit on one of the governing boards of FIS and also MRIP. We're going to be transitioning that MRIP work most likely to Jeff. And then we'll continue to provide data to the for the Atlantic coast, to the Fisheries Information System, and also therefore to Fisheries of the U.S. Annually, as we have been in prior years. And that covers us.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike on the goals of ACCSP and the action plan? Seeing none, we have a motion from the Administrative Oversight Committee to approve the 2017 action plan as presented. It doesn't need a second, but I would like to add one little phrase to it as amended today because of the amendment we did. Is there any objection to that friendly amendment being added on to the motion? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving the motion as amended? Seeing no objection, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, staff, for putting this together. I appreciate that. Is there any other business to come before the business session today? Seeing none, I see this meeting adjourned. What time are we?